Today is a day when the battle for democracy has perhaps never been clearer. The courts, for now, still holding up the rule of law and ruling in favor of cities and states opposing Donald Trump's efforts to militarize our cities and to use troops against what Trump describes as, quote, the enemy within. Today, the state of Illinois is suing the Trump administration to stop the deployment of National Guard troops to Chicago. Trump has ordered 400 troops to be mobilized from Texas and then to be sent to Chicago and Portland, Oregon. And that is despite a court order preventing any deployment to the latter. As for Chicago, Governor J.B. Pritzker has long opposed the deployment of troops to his city, saying there is no need for them. Here's what he said in a press conference in the last hour.
I spent the days and weeks following that out and about in our communities, in Bronzeville, in Austin, in Little Village, Berwyn, South Shore, and others, walking and talking and listening to real Chicagoans and local business owners, something Donald Trump, Greg Bovino, Tom Homan, and Kristi Noem have never bothered to do. No insurrections, no invasions. The folks in the neighborhoods do not want armed troops marching in their streets. When it comes to public safety, they want civilian law enforcement when they need them, and jobs, and after-school programs for kids in the neighborhoods. They do not want Donald Trump to occupy their communities. Trump and the thuggery that his agents have brought has actively made us less safe.
Dramatic scenes unfolded in the city of Chicago over the last 48 hours. One woman was shot by federal agents. That sparked further protests and clashes. Agents were also seen throwing tear gas at people on a busy street. On Friday, a Chicago elected official was handcuffed in a hospital emergency room after she asked ICE agents whether they had a warrant to arrest a resident. She will be our guest later in the broadcast. Attorneys for the state of Illinois sum it up like this, quote, defendants' provocative and arbitrary actions have threatened to undermine public safety by inciting a public outcry. When it comes to deploying troops from other states, Illinois says this, quote, the American people, regardless of where they reside, should not live under the threat of occupation by the United States military, particularly not simply because their city or state leadership has fallen out of a president's favor. A battle for the rule of law in this country playing out on the streets of Chicago and other American cities is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. On the ground for us in Chicago, MSNBC senior national political correspondent Jacob Sobroff will join us in a moment. He is at that news conference we just played for you with the governor. Also joining us, retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath, who today announced she is running for the open Senate seat in Kentucky. We'll talk about that later, too. And joining me at the table is NYU law professor, MSNBC legal analyst Melissa Murray. Also joining us, MSNBC senior White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard. Melissa Murray, let me start with you and just ask if you agree with this idea that for now, the courts are holding, and they are not because of how they're deciding, but that they are still evaluating the facts on the ground, and they happen to be ruling in favor of the cities and states.
Yeah, I think that's really important to remember, that these district courts aren't just flying off the handle and issuing decisions. They are actually amassing evidence. The order from the district judge in Oregon that came out this weekend was very detailed about when the order for federalization of the National Guard in Portland had occurred and how proximate to that order the actual incidents that the president has cited as justifying the deployment of the National Guard actually occurred. And in fact, it's months in time apart. And she's like, that can't be what justifies sending federal troops into a state for ICE enforcement.
Like Trump's still talking about the 2020.
Right. Or even just a few months ago. Yeah. And, you know, one of the things she emphasizes is that in the earlier cases, like, for example, the one in California where the Ninth Circuit stayed a district court's order, so basically allowed the administration to deploy National Guard troops, they emphasize how close in time the alleged rebellion or disruption that the president had used had come with the order for federalization. So it was much closer and much more proximate. She, in this order, relating to Oregon talked about, like, this is actually months apart in time. So we need a closer nexus to the harm that you've identified that would justify deploying National Guard to a particular state. And this just isn't it. It doesn't check out. So there's a lot of record evidence here, a lot of just detailed information about what the situation is on the ground. This isn't Trump derangement syndrome. This is a district judge doing her job, like looking through the evidence and making a reasoned decision about whether or not this needs to be temporarily enjoined.
The sound of General John Kelly's sort of voice in the days before Election Day, warning of troops on the streets, just rings so loudly in my ears. I mean, this is something that the military has said it doesn't do or want.
No, I mean, again, there are lots of reasons why the founding fathers were very wary of the prospect of a standing army. They really feared the idea that a standing army would essentially allow either a president or Congress to basically be tyrannical, to actually use the power of the military against ordinary people. This is something that they saw in the colonial period with Great Britain. They didn't want it in the United States. So there were all of these checks that they divide power over the armed forces. Congress can declare war. The president can be commander in chief, but only Congress can supply the armed forces. So they try and diffuse this because they understand that a military presence in a domestic context is a terrible idea for citizens.
Jacob Soboroff, have you popped out of that news conference? I don't mean to be doing this on live TV. There you are. Can you hear us?
Sorry, is that Nicole? Was that for me?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Hi, I got you.
Hi. Why
Forgive
don't you...
me. Sorry.
No. Take me through what news was just made by the governor there.
Sure. I've just stepped outside this news conference, which is still ongoing. The members of the congressional delegation from the Chicago area are all in there. The mayor of Chicago is in there. Other local officials are there with the governor, who obviously sued the federal government today to stop the deployment of the National Guard. And I think, what I took away from listening to Governor Pritzker almost systematically deconstruct every action of the federal immigration enforcement operation here over the course of the past month, which they're calling Operation Midway Blitz, which is also important to note, is being run by Greg Bavino, the same chief of patrol of the Border Patrol that was out in Los Angeles, talking openly about how the March on MacArthur Park was a show of force. He said it was illegal and unconstitutional what the federal government is doing here, particularly as it relates to potential deployment of troops here to Chicago. And Governor J.B. Pritzker said he would use any power under his authority as the governor of the state of Illinois to push back against this, everything that he called a pretext to the invocation of the Insurrection Act to have federal troops on the streets, not just of Chicago, but of cities all across America. It's exactly what Karen Bass warned, the mayor of Los Angeles, when these operations started at the beginning of the summer, that city was a petri dish for other cities across the nation, and Governor Pritzker is basically concurring with that. I asked him in the news conference, and I don't think we have the footage yet, but just to summarize what I asked him about was whether or not, if he was going to use all the authority at his disposal as the governor of the state, would he direct state law enforcement? We've heard Tom Homan say that local law enforcement, federal law enforcement would arrest local officials. I asked him if he would direct his state law enforcement, the Illinois State Police, to somehow stand in the way of these ongoing operations, whether it was the deployment of the National Guard or potentially arrest federal agents that he deems or the state police deem to be doing illegal activity. He would not go that far, but he is putting up a very strong show of force of his own here. I'm standing with the elected officials from this state, saying that not only will they use every legal avenue possible, but they're telling citizens of this city and of this state to show up with their cell phones to document every second of what's going on in the streets, whether it's that apartment complex on the South Shore that was raided last weekend, or that incident that took place over the weekend where someone was shot, or even what's happening outside the Broadview detention facility where Kristi Noem went up on the roof and was looking down at the assembled protesters. They are not taking this lightly, and it may be as serious or even more so than the officials that I saw in Los Angeles at the beginning of these operations in June.
Let me play a little bit more of the governor at that press conference, talking about, because I feel like we run the risk of repeating a narrative for which there's not a lot of evidence. These are immigration proceedings, but no one has seen any evidence of who was apprehended or who they were looking for or why people were taken and their children left unaccounted for. 4 U.S. citizen children, as of close of business Friday, were missing. because their grown-ups have been taken. So let me play the governor on some of that.
Trump's invasion force is not going after the worst, like he said. They're harassing and detaining many people based only on the color of their skin. Tamale vendors, delivery people, people looking for work at Home Depot, and even families just out and about enjoying themselves on a sunny day. Dasha Ramirez, an 8-year-old girl, and her family were detained by federal agents while enjoying a day in Millennium Park. Witnesses saw her crying and clutching her doll. Honestly, what danger did they represent? What is it that they presented that was so awful? And how did detaining them make anyone safer?
So just specifically, what do they say they are doing in Chicago? And what reporting do you have as to what they're actually doing in Chicago?
Yeah, they've said they've detained or apprehended 1,000 people since the start of this operation at the beginning of September. And of course, as always, the federal government is sending out news releases with what they say are the worst of the worst, the people that would traditionally be targets of these federal immigration enforcement operations in cities across America. Red states, blue states, you name it. That's what the Border Patrol does. That's what Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security investigations is supposed to do. But that is not what is happening on a wide scale here. They have not released a list of 1,000 violent criminals. They have not released a list of 1,000 people who had pending violent criminal charges. In fact, they released short and truncated lists, basically press releases to highlight the people that they want to highlight. And just like in Los Angeles, we are seeing people at their places of business, out on the streets apprehended, driving vehicles around this city. And I think that is what, as you said, is so important to emphasize. Who are the people in that apartment building that were detained in the middle of the night? Who are the children that are without their parents? Those are questions the federal government has not yet answered. And I should say very clearly, I requested an interview with Greg Bovino, given that we're on the ground here in Chicago, and I haven't heard anything back from the Border Patrol, Nicole.